AM 1420.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz, here to talk with you about the paranormal, as we are each and every Saturday night. Broadcasting live on WBSM and on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. And Matt, I don't care what the problem was there, just blame the board.
I always do.
It's always the board. It's that 1965 board. So, there you go. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the equipment is. All right. Well, we promise that we'll be able to overcome any adversity here in the Spooky Studio as we go forward tonight. We're going to be joined by Jim Harold. You know him from the Paranormal Podcast and from Jim Harold's Campfire. He's going to be talking with us about his book, Jim Harold's Campfire: True Ghost Stories. And we are going to share some true ghost stories with you over the course of tonight. Now, I know there was some buzz on the internet and on our message boards and everything. People were talking about how this was going to be another bait and switch like we did a couple years ago on Halloween, where we said we were going to tell spooky ghost stories and then we pulled off a War of the Worlds type hoax. Well, nope. This is the real deal. Jim's book is out. It's available wherever books are sold. You can buy it online, and we'll have it set up on the Spooky Store as well if it's not there already. So this is the real deal, and these are the real chilling stories that Jim has heard from his listeners over the years. So he's going to share some of those with us in just a minute. I just want to throw a couple quick announcements out there because Halloween is coming up in a couple days. I want to make sure, because the weather was so bad for the last few, over the course of the last few days, I want to make sure people know about this for tomorrow when it's going to be a little bit better out, and for Monday night. There's a couple of home haunts here in the Fairhaven area where people are actually, they've done up their yard, and I'm talking like big time. This stuff makes like Factory of Terror look tame. And these people have put together these home haunts for the purpose of raising money for various different charities. Matt Brodeur, who's a Spooky South Coast fan, he has put one together over across from the Fairhaven Shipyard. He's raising money for the Shriners. And then we have Manny Souza, another big Spooky South Coast fan. He's got the old Oxford haunt over on Oxford Street. And there's something like 17 different haunts around Fairhaven alone. And you can go to... Manny's got a website up there with a map of all of them, so you can check them out and try to visit all of them. And then over on Myrtle Street in Acushnet, there's one that's being set up for for the Miss New Bedford Scholarship. So those are just a couple of the ones. Those are the ones that I wrote about in a story that's coming up in the Standard Times. But there's haunts all over the place. So get out there and check them out and leave a few dollars in the bucket for a good cause. And also tomorrow morning will be the Village PTA Pancake Breakfast at the Elks Lodge in Wareham. It's from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Silent Assassin, you're going to be there cooking some pancakes with me.
Yep, I'm going to be there.
Moniz, I assume you'll be there eating some pancakes.
Actually, no, I'll be,
Just play along, Moniz.
Okay.
All right.
Gonna get drunk off pancakes.
It's $4 a person.
$4.
Oopie-doo. You can't go wrong with that. $4, and it's $15 for a family. Now, the family is the mom, the dad, the kids, not great-grandpa and second cousin twice removed. So, Carl, I know you were planning on bringing your whole neighborhood because you're related to everybody in town, but I don't know if that's going to work. So, all right, those are the announcements. And again,
What about my announcement?
Oh, you had an announcement?
Yeah. I am now going to be doing haunted tours at Lizzie Borden's on weekends.
And that's where you're going to be tomorrow at 9 a.m.?
Yep.
That's ridiculous, Moniz. Nobody wants to hunt for ghosts at 9 a.m. They want to eat pancakes. Bring them down. Rent a van. All right. So, well, if you want to get in touch with Lizzie Boards and set one of those up, you can give them a call, 508-675-7333.
There will be regular tours on the half hour on the weekends.
There you go. So just get a hold of them. It's also lizzie-borden.com. Speaking of which, before we get into things with Jim, we're making him wait while we plug all this stuff, but we do have 4 tickets remaining for Dead of Winter coming up on February 25th at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. You get to investigate with the Spooky Crew and Jeff Belanger. I know Andy Lake's going to be there. I think Spirit Medium Tiffany's coming along. We're going to have a big gang there to check out all the haunted happenings there, and you're going to get the run of the place for the whole night, plus dinner, lectures, book signings, Q&A, all that kind of stuff. Tickets are $125. They are available if you go to jeffbelanger.com and then scroll down the calendar. You'll see the link for Dead of Winter down the side. And also, we've been putting it up on Facebook nonstop. So 4 tickets left, and that's it. There's only 25 spots, so get them while you can. And let's just move right along with the show. Now, joining us on the line is Jim Harold. You know him as the host of the Paranormal Podcast, which he started a little bit before we did this show. And Now, and he's got Jim Harold's Campfire as well. Jim, you're a busy guy.
I am busy these days, but not too busy to be on the Spooky South Coast show. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for asking me to come on the show tonight.
Hey, I can't believe it took us this long to hook up with you because, when we started doing this show in 2006, we talked about the idea of podcasting. We barely knew what podcasting was back then. And we said, we don't know if anybody'd want to listen to a paranormal podcast. So I type in paranormal podcast into Google, and sure enough, there's your show.
Yeah, started way back in 2005, and there weren't a whole lot of podcasts. At that point, I think there were 10 or 15 paranormal podcasts. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do to compete against all these different shows? And now it turns out that, there's tons of these things. There's tons of shows on the paranormal, but I think it's great because it's getting the word out about these strange experiences that I think so many people have these days.
And I think it's kind of funny now that there's enough of a voice out there in the paranormal community that people can go to all these different outlets and not get this, even if it's the same guest from show to show to show, they're not going to get the same perspectives. They're not going to get the same questions.
Exactly.
The more interviews there are, the more chances there are to further explore the topic.
Yeah, and I think it's fun because the idea of, for example, with my book Campfire, I'd started the Campfire podcast a few years after I started my original podcast, the paranormal podcast, and people really seem to gravitate towards this idea of having a place to tell their stories. And I think it's because for so long people were told, don't talk about that. Let's not get into that. Well, you're weird, or you're crazy, or you're just imagining things. And now I think, it's very cathartic for people to have all these different outlets to get information from and have places that they can tell their stories. And I'm sure that you have folks share things on your program and on my program, and, of course, big things like Coast to Coast. I mean, really, the voices are out there now, and I think it's a fantastic thing.
Well, what I love about the Campfire podcast is that it's different. I mean, we get complaints from people, and I'm sure you do too with paranormal podcasts, where people say, I love the show, but I was expecting to be creeped out. I was expecting to be scared, but that's not what shows like yours and ours are about. They're about exploring the topics of the paranormal and trying to make them a little bit more accessible to people. But with Campfire, you get the chance to really give people those chills.
Yeah, it is kind of fun. I mean, not all of our stories are like drop down scary. Some of them are poignant, just some of them are weird, but we do have, and I'm sure we'll talk about some tonight, we just do have some really kind of freaky, spooky ones. So the tales kind of run the gamut, but it's a lot of fun getting all of them. And again, talking to people from all over the world that listen to our program, it's just great to get their stories. It's so much fun. And it's not always about being creeped out. Sometimes it's a loved one who has gotten a message back to us. Maybe it's a premonition, maybe it's a weird dream, but it's all very interesting.
And it's it's the personal connection with the paranormal, which is what I like about it.
Yeah, well, the thing is that what I think is interesting is a lot of times the people that, you think about ghost hunting and those kind of things, and not that I'm anti-ghost hunting or anything like that, but most of the tales in my book are people who were going about their everyday life. They were just doing what they do. They were going to work. They were cooking dinner, whatever it was, and something visited upon them. Now, we have a couple of ghost hunting stories in there, but the vast, vast majority are just people going about their regular life, and then something came and found them.
And, speaking of which, how were you going about your regular life when you started putting a focus on the paranormal?
Well, what happened was, Tim, I had studied to be a broadcaster in school and ended up working in the broadcast industry and in the media industry, but on the business side. And it always kind of irked me that I never did anything with it in terms of in front of the mic or in front of the camera or whatever. And what ended up happening was 2005, I've always loved talk radio and heard about this thing called podcasting. And I said, I need to try that. I mean, it's a way that the average person can have their own radio program. So I started thinking about topics, and I'm like, if I'm going to do this, it has to be something I'm passionate about, something I'm interested in, something that will hold my interest and hold the interest of the audience. And I remember, I'm in my early 40s, and I remember that old TV show In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. And I loved that when I was a kid, and I kept thinking about what would interest me the most. I thought sports, I couldn't add anything. Politics, I'm not a Rush Limbaugh. Music, you can't really do music on podcasts because of rights issues. And I thought, well, what's one thing that's interested me my whole life? If I go into a bookstore, what's the first section I go to? If I go to television, what's the first thing I look for? Anything on the paranormal has fascinated me my whole life. So I started it in 2005 thinking, I'll do this 6 months and I'll have all the answers. Well, guess what? 6 years later, I have more questions than I have answers.
Yeah, well, that means that you're doing it right. If you're delving into it enough that more questions keep popping up, that's when podcasts that have popped up in the last few years have become too much of people who think that they have all the answers, people who think that they know everything. And the one thing that drives me crazy is when you have hosts who talk over the guests and basically espouse their knowledge all over the guests, and the guests don't get a chance to have their say. And that's something that I know that would never happen on your show.
No, I'm pretty adamant about that. I mean, the way that I look at it is this, is that if people wanted to listen to a show of me just talking, I could open up the mic and I could record 30 minutes of me talking. Quite honestly, I don't really know how well that would do. I think it's far more interesting to hear what the guests have to say and to bring a variety of theories. I mean, I had a guy on the show tonight, I shouldn't say a guy, a Benedictine monk who thinks that UFOs are demons. Now, do I necessarily agree with that? I don't know that I agree with that, but I think it's a fascinating theory, and we want to get those theories out and get those viewpoints out, and that's why it's so great to have people come on and tell their stories, because that's an opportunity for them. Because, the average person doesn't get a lot of opportunity to share, with thousands of people what's happened to them. So that's why I enjoy doing the campfire.
And while we have you on before, I do definitely want to talk more about the campfire and about some of these stories that are in the new book. But I do want to ask you this, because one of the things that we suffer a little bit of criticism about is that when we have guests like that who have kind of out there theories, some people feel like we don't challenge them enough. And I sometimes feel like it's not really our job to do that. It's our job to ask the questions that the audience might have, but it's not our job to take them to task for whatever their beliefs are. We're just a medium for them to share their beliefs, and it's up to people that listen to it to walk away and make up their own mind.
I agree, actually. I mean, in this case, I did, the guest came back and said something like, well, technologically it would be totally unfeasible to travel from the stars or whatever. And I said, well, I challenged him a little bit and said, 200 years ago, people would say going to the moon was an impossibility. Mm-hmm. And for all the technological challenges. And, occasionally I will throw in kind of a devil's, no pun intended in this case, a devil's advocate question. But again, I'm not into kind of ambush journalism or anything like that. Again, I may ask, the skeptic may say, people who disagree with you may say. I may ask a question like that occasionally, but at that point I let it go and let them have their say. And exactly as you say, I've had people with diametrically opposed theories on my program, and it's not for me to say who's right, who's wrong. It's for me to be a conduit to bring it to you so you can decide who you think is right and who you think is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how radio works, and I don't think people understand that because they see too much of this combative, Bill O'Reilly, Rush Limbaugh, Al Franken type approach, and they think that that's what it's supposed to be. But, talk radio, when it's done right, is an open forum and an open dialogue. I
agree very much, and it's so much fun to do it. And it brings out people, as people are very passionate about this, and they'll say, well, you had somebody who is a ghost hunter, and they use this technique, and, well, they're all wrong, and they're doing it wrong, and they get very, very upset. But I had somebody that said to me, because I had somebody with a certain belief on, well, I'm not going to listen to any more of your shows. And I said, well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I reserve the right. It's my program. I'll have people of all different views on my program, even if I strongly disagree with them.
I tend to find that when they say they're not going to listen anymore, that means they'll be the first person tuning in the next week because...
That's right. Exactly.
They want to see if you took their suggestions to heart.
Exactly. I agree.
So now, while you've been doing this Campfire podcast and all these stories have been coming in, have you been making a mental note and thinking at some point that you would want to find a way to collect them all and bring them across to readers, or was it something that just became so overwhelming because the call was out there for it?
Well, I think what happened was a combination of things. I knew from the very beginning that there was a possibility if this podcast was successful that I would want to somehow compile the stories. I didn't know if that would be in electronic form or what it would be. A book did occur to me. And then, almost a year and a half ago, I was interviewing one of my author friends, Annie Wilder, about one of her books, and she said, "Geez, Jim, you ought to write a book with your campfire stories." And I got to thinking about it. At first I did the aw shucks thing, I can't do a book or whatever. And then I got to thinking about it, and the one thing about podcasts, and for your listeners who are not familiar, essentially a podcast is a internet radio show on demand that you can listen to anytime you want. Nothing more complicated than that. You can listen right at the website or use your iPod, iPhone, Android phone. Pretty much any device will play them back. But people get all like, oh, that's too techy. I can't figure that out. So, unfortunately, a lot of people don't listen to podcasts. I mean, this month alone, we'll probably have almost 400,000 downloads of our programs. But the problem is that still leaves out millions of people. So I thought, well, what is accessible to everybody? And taking Annie's suggestion, that's why we decided to do this book, because these are great stories, and stories from people all over the world. I hate to think that they're in kind of some little technological prison that people can't figure out. I want to share it with a greater world, and I hope that the book helps do that.
Well, and I think, too, that it's not just that people are afraid of the term podcast, but I think that people digest these stories better sometimes in the written word. It's easier to make that connection when you can get more inside the story when you're reading it instead of just when you're hearing somebody talk about it, because you automatically put in the prejudices of hearing that person's voice and hearing the way that they're telling the story, and you can say, right, oh, this guy sounds like he's crazy. But when you're reading it in the book, you can say, wow, this is a very interesting story that I might not have wanted to listen to on the radio, but I can really get into it when it's written down in front of me.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in presenting content in different ways, and different people like different things. Some people like to listen, some people like to read. And what I tried to do with the stories, really, if you read the book, there are 73 stories there. A few of them are my stories, but the lion's share, 68 of the stories, are from our listening audience. There was some editing that went on, but it was pretty minimal, because what I wanted to do was preserve the feel and the description that the people had. So I didn't want to make it sound like me telling them their story. I wanted to make it sound like they were telling their story. And so far on Amazon and so forth, the reviews have been very good. So I hope that was successful. But we wanted to maintain their stories as they were, not really change them up a lot.
And you probably had to go through the process of finding these people who share these stories and asking them to share these stories with readers?
Well, actually, what I did was I had in mind from the beginning to do something with the story. So basically, when people were on, I asked them at that time.
Okay.
Through because basically, and if your listeners ever want to come on the show and share any stories, they can just go to jimharold.com, JimHarold.com. There's a little place there at the top. It says Campfire Sign Up, and you can sign up to come on one of the shows and tell your story. And at that time, you give permission to use it in whatever medium that we distribute it in. But it has been, everybody who has been in the book has been thrilled about it. They're like, oh, I can't believe I made the book. And we just have a really great community. A lot of great, I hate to call them fans, I prefer the word friends, and just been great supporting the shows and the book.
Yeah, we're the same way. We don't the word fan kind of weirds us out. So we just say listeners, or we say if some of the people who have been listening for us for a long time, we say they're part of the spooky crew. So we find ways around that. Yeah, fans is just weird. But
exactly.
Well, one of the things that I have to ask you then, if you are getting all these stories submitted to you and you're sharing them with people, I mean, when you are listening to some of these stories, is your BS meter up, or are you just giving people the chance to share their story?
Well, in general, I don't edit a lot of stories out. I let people, if I thought somebody had a mental issue or something, of course I wouldn't put it on the air. But other than that, I will put stories on the air, even if I don't necessarily buy them. Now, in the book, though, what I tried to do is really hone in on the stories that I thought were the best of the best, the ones that I thought were the most plausible, the ones that I thought were the most unique, the ones that I thought the storytellers were the most sincere. And I've got to say, I do have a general theory of the paranormal, where I say perhaps 95% of the things that pass for paranormal are not in fact paranormal, but people mistake and hoaxes and so forth and so on. And maybe only 5% are really something. But in this case, most of the people I talk to on the show, I feel they are being very, very sincere in what they are saying. And you can usually tell. I can tell when people are putting us on and they're like, dude, I saw a ghost. You know, that kind of thing. But for the most part, on my shows, I think people are sincere. And so many times I get people who are 30, 40, 50 years old, 60 years old sometimes, who will tell me something that happened to them when they were 13. And these stories have really made an impression on them. That's a very common theme. Older people telling me, middle-aged people, people in their 30s telling me stories happened to them when they were little kids, but they've never forgotten those stories.
It really is. It's amazing how much the details of these stories stay with people because it's such an extraordinary experience for them. I mean, I can't tell you, what I ate for lunch last Wednesday, but I can tell you about every paranormal experience that I've had. And, it just seems to be one of those things that people have, amazing recall of it. And I know that there is some concern that they might be filling in details based on, horror stories they might have seen or ghost shows they might have seen on television. But I really do feel that when people are sharing these stories, they're giving us an honest remembrance of what they can recall.
Yes, absolutely. And I've had people who have come on the show, and they feel as though, you can tell that there's a little waver in their throat, that this really means something to them. It's not just a joke, and it's not just a goof, but it's something that had a big emotional impact on them, and then they're sharing it with us.
So when you are doing the Campfire Stories podcast, I mean, what do you have to do to get yourself in the mind frame to listen to these stories, or even to write about them when you're putting them together in the book? I mean, do you have to light a fire and sit beside it?
No, there's no fires lit. The thing is that I really, and it is amazing, because I did hit it on the head. I said I had to come up with something that really interests me. And I guess anybody that does anything for a long period of time, there's times that you're more into it than others. Some nights you don't feel like doing a show, but you do a show. But I've got to say, I'm almost always in the mood for it, because the thing is that when people come on the program and tell me their stories, they almost always throw me for a loop. After you've heard so many of these stories, you'll start to think, okay, now here's what she's going to say, or here's what he's going to say. And then they'll take it in a totally different direction. And the other fun thing is, and this happens almost every week, is somebody will tell me a story that I've not heard one like before. Had a great story a couple weeks ago that maybe later I can share, even though it's not in the book. It gives you a flavor of the book, about a woman and her mom. Totally unique story. So you think that you've heard it all, and then next week somebody will come up with something new. So that's what makes it interesting for me, because you never know what you're going to hear. And I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I used to love to sit around and tell spooky stories. Well, I get to do this all the time, and it's not always. Sometimes it can be sad, sometimes it can be poignant, but it's always interesting. I'm always interested to hear what people say, and people feel towards me that they'll tell me those stories. I mean, that makes me feel pretty honored.
And myself, I mean, my background is in journalism, and I'm always used to being the objective person on the outside of the story that's trying to, document what's going on. And to be able to be involved enough with people that they feel comfortable to tell me things, I mean, it's an amazing feeling for me, and it must be even more so for you, because you're getting these stories on a weekly basis from people. I mean, you must be honored that people have enough trust in you to share these stories with you and have you not be judging them for them.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. It is an honor to have people share these stories. And a lot of times these stories are, about a loved one who passed away, and this is a very poignant thing for them. It's not, it's not boo. And then sometimes it's lighter hearted. Oh, we had Ruth. She was a family ghost, and she'd sit down, and there was an imprint on the couch. Those kind of things are more fun, for lack of a better term. But a lot of times it's not necessarily. Sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes it's scary. Sometimes it's emotional, but still, it's great that people come on the program and share the stories.
Whether it be on Paranormal Podcast or on the Campfire Podcast, are there any subjects that you would consider taboo that you wouldn't want to touch on either one of those shows?
Within the realm of the paranormal, I can't think of anything. I've never done one, but I would do a show on Satanism, for example, finding out if it's real or a greater investigation of that. I mean, as long as it's in good taste and it's not, the one thing I would not want to do is anything where we ever suggest anybody do anything to harm themselves or harm anybody else, do anything illegal. In fact, I've had shows before where we've talked about ghost hunting and really focused on the idea of being safe when you do that, being respectful to property, not trespassing. And Jeff Belanger, who I know you guys have had a lot of work with and a lot of dealings with, came on, and we talked about this at great length. Being safe when you're ghost hunting. So we try to be responsible. I would never propose. I would never promote. I would never suggest anybody do anything illegal or harmful or anything like that. But pretty much any topic I think is interesting, and we would be open to discuss it.
We're pretty much the same way. The one thing that we do have to skirt around sometimes is the topic of religion. We do address it, but we do have to be very careful because we have a very religious listenership here on our local airwaves. So we are real careful about that. But I mean, people for the most part understand that we are going to explore some of these topics, and as long as we don't do it with any biases, there's really no problem.
Right. Well, I agree. For example, I'm of the Christian faith, and my kids are being raised and going to Catholic school, and those are my beliefs. But we've interviewed pagans before, and witches, and the gentleman I interviewed tonight is way on the other side. He thinks that the current Catholic Church is liberal, and he's the one that thinks that the UFOs are demons. So I mean, we'll talk to people on one side of an issue or way over on the other side.
Well, I definitely want to get into some of these campfire stories, especially coming up on the second hour. But if you have any questions for Jim Harold, you can give us a call, 508-996-0500, 1-877-996-1420. You can also email us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com. Jump in the chat room on Spooky TV at spookysouthcoast.com, or you can send us a text at 508-444-2661. And I want to thank Mark for being the only person that uses the text line, too, by the way. Thanks, Mark. Money well invested. But one of the questions that I do have is when you were putting together this book and you're sitting down there and sharing all these stories, did you feel like there was the need to make any interpretations in the stories, or did you kind of just leave them completely as is in the way that the people told them?
Pretty much as they told them. Because, again, it's the same theory you have. I mean, I think journalism used to be, now, of course, there's the yellow journalism and, crusades where they try to convict people in newspapers and so forth. I'm not talking about that. Mm-hmm. But I think the journalistic idea, and, I don't have a formal journalism degree. I was a communications major, so I took a lot of journalism classes. But as I understand it, the idea was to present theories, facts, whatever it might be, and let the listenership decide. So, again, I didn't interpret it too strongly. Now, there are a few stories in there of mine that I do interpret it. And, again, I mean, I'm not totally objective. I do say on the shows I basically consider myself to be a skeptical believer, meaning that I think that most of the things that pass for the paranormal are probably not paranormal at all, but just people being mistaken and so forth, or unfortunately hoaxes, or even people with mental issues. But I think there's a few percent that there really is something to. Now, let's take that, though. If you take a few percent of all the different things that are reported around the world, whether it be ghosts, UFOs, cryptozoology, whatever it is, and just, let's say 3%, there's something strange to them. Well, that's millions of cases.
Well, that's enough. 3%'s enough for me.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, I've had Michael Shermer on my show, who is, of course, probably with James Randi, the most preeminent skeptic in the country right now, the editor of Skeptic Magazine. You see him on TV all the time. When somebody has to rebuff a claim and call it swamp gas or ball lightning or whatever. And
he's the go-to guy for that, yeah?
Yeah, and I said to him, I mean, we probably agree in 95% of the cases, or 97%. He said, well, but I said, what about the other 3%? And he says, well, we understand it could be unknown. We just put it on a shelf. It's like, no, that's the part you want to take off the shelf and you want to look at and try to figure out what's going on. So I don't want to make it sound like I have no beliefs. I mean, I do believe that there is the paranormal out there. I wouldn't be spending this much time investigating it in a way, although I don't consider myself a paranormal investigator. I believe there's something there. It's just I think you have to keep an open mind, but not so open your brains fall out.
Well, what do you think? I mean, when you started Paranormal Podcast in 2005, it was kind of just early enough in this current paranormal boom that you've been able to watch all these shows develop on television. You've been able to watch all this emphasis on ghost hunting and pop culture. What do you think of the state that it's gotten to now? Has it gone to the point now where it's become, it's not mainstream, but at least it's more in the public consciousness. And has that helped or hurt the paranormal field?
Both. I think it's done both. I think, and it's so funny you mention this today, because my wife and I were watching a little bit of the Today Show. And this morning they had a segment with Lester Holt and the Weekend Anchors, and they were doing a ghost hunt. And as soon as they did the ghost hunt, the spooky music came out, and, the kind of the weird angled shots and all of those things. And the thing is that I guess the issue is that's good in a way because more people are getting exposed to it, but it's bad in a way because it just becomes a big joke.
Yeah.
And there is no wrong or right answer. I mean, for example, I've been lucky enough, Dave Schrader from Darkness Radio had me on his program, vice versa. I know he's been very involved with some TV stuff, did Darkness Radio, did Paranormal Challenge. Our friend Jeff Belanger was very involved behind the scenes in some of the programs out there. And so I'm not poo-pooing those shows. I think that they're interesting and they're good. Sometimes I worry that everything's a stereotype, the way that it's portrayed in the media, and it's always with the X-Files music, and it's always kind of the same template. What I would love to see, and I don't think it's going to happen because, the powers that be would consider it boring television. I've always said that if I did a TV show, I would love to do an In Search Of type show where the material is treated like a 60 Minutes of the Paranormal.
Sure.
That's what I would like to do. And without the spooky music, without, being dressed in all black, with all the stereotypes. But it would never sell.
Because now people have become so desensitized to the paranormal that they need to have that shock factor. That's why a show like Ghost Hunters is good because, Taps can keep it going, but another show could never do the same formula that they do. They have to keep improving upon that and finding new ways to bring people in. And Matt Moniz and myself were just recently on an episode of Ghost Adventures at Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, and I was watching it with some colleagues at my newspaper job, and somebody actually said to me, is the way they're investigating, is that what you guys do? And I had to kind of explain that, no, that's their niche. That's what works for them. And, that we would never go to your house and conduct an investigation and act that way. And you just find yourself having to, at least you get the opportunity now to explain yourself as somebody who's in the paranormal field. But, now you have to explain yourself, too. It's kind of that double-edged sword. Yeah, I think it's exactly a double-edged sword. And, I don't want to go to the bad old days where people didn't feel that they could tell their stories. Uh-huh. But occasionally I'd like to be able to mix in a little more serious treatment. But I'm kind of skeptical. I mean, TV is a visual medium. TV detests talking heads. And I think that TV needs action. And I totally understand that because, if it were just people standing around looking for ghosts and there was no excitement to it or anything, it probably wouldn't last a show. So I understand the media. I've worked in the media. I know how it works. So just occasionally I'd like to see something, and there are some shows like that out there, maybe not quite as popular. There's a show called Taboo, which sometimes gets into paranormal themes sometimes.
There are a few shows out there kind of like that, but I'd like to see more of them.
Well, I do, like I said, I do want to get into these stories from the new book, Jim Harold's Campfire, True Ghost Stories, coming up in the second hour. And as you mentioned, jimharold.com is the website if people want to go and find out more about your shows, about your book. And I do want to ask you, though, before we go to commercial, because it's very rare that I get to talk with somebody who, does what we do. And,
right.
Normally we tend to, we don't want to talk about the fourth wall. We don't want to break that down, but it's fun talking about this stuff with you. I want to ask you, who would be maybe your top 3 guests that you've had on the show over the last 6 years?
Brad Steiger. Stanton Friedman is always a favorite, and I have to say our buddy Jeff Belanger. Those are I think those are probably my favorite, although Marie D. Jones is fantastic. I enjoy having her on the program. And there are quite a few other people. Dr. Bob Curran, it's really tough. It'd be easier if you were asking me my top 5 or top 6. But those right there are the ones that I'm thinking of. Brad Steiger is just amazing. He's in his mid-70s, has written over 100 books, 150 books.
Yeah.
Just a real nice man, but very knowledgeable. And Jim, it's so good to be back on the Paranormal Podcast. I mean, he's just got this great voice that I can't even mimic. And just fascinating guy. Dr. Curran, I'm sure you're familiar with him.
Oh, yeah.
He's from Ireland. He can tell these great stories. There's one great story he told about this grandfather who supposedly died and then came back and had dinner with his family and had a drink and then went back to his grave. I mean, just great stories. And, Jeff is just fantastic. Kind of, in some ways, I mean, Jeff is probably, he may even be a few years younger than me, but in some ways he's a mentor, because I've really looked at what he's done and I've respected what he's done and said, I want to be like that guy. Maybe more so he's more of an author and dabbles in podcasting, and I'm more of a podcaster and I dabble in books, but he's a fantastic guy and just knows a ton about this stuff.
You got to be careful, Jim, because Belanger's on his way home from a library lecture in Middleborough, which is not far from here. So he's probably picking up our signal on his way home.
Oh, no.
So you don't want to say too many nice things about him because he's probably
ignore
hearing
everything I just said. It's all a lie.
And I have to work with him on 30-odd minutes every Tuesday. Don't swell his head, please. It won't fit in the studio.
It's impossible to swell his head anymore. No, but he is a great guy, and he is a mentor to pretty much everybody. But what I liked about the list of people that you named there is everybody takes the paranormal in a different direction. Marie's bringing in a lot of these cutting-edge theories like the multiverse theory, and, she's not afraid to shy away from some of the more heady topics that are out there. And then you get a guy like Brad, who's a pure researcher of this stuff and has been doing it longer than anybody. And then Jeff, who's always willing to look at the sociological aspects of ghosts and ghost stories. I mean, everybody seems to have a new way, and it's not the same thing anymore where it's everybody just, investigating ghosts and spouting off what happened. Everybody's finding new and different approaches to the paranormal.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even mentioning, I mean, my third paranormal show, free paranormal show, is the Paranormal Report, which I do with Clayton Morris, who actually, and this is not political, he's a Fox News anchor, Fox and Friends on the weekends, and we do a weekly video paranormal news show. And that's a great deal of fun, and that's where we look at clips and talk about different things that have happened throughout the week in the paranormal, report different stories, break it down, and say, do we think it's fact? Do we think it's fake? Not to steal too much of their title there. But certainly we've been doing that for a couple of years, and that's a great deal of fun. So trying to look at it from different directions, absolutely.
Hey, you got to be careful, though, these days, because there's so much stuff with YouTube and with the ghost apps that you can put on your phone and your iPhone and everything. It's so easy to fake evidence these days.
Oh, I agree. That's why when Clayton and I look at things, we look at things that have been taken with multiple angles, multiple witnesses, expert witnesses, pilots, those kind of things. If you get into the UFO field, I think a lot of that you have to go out because, yes, you can do effects on your home computer that couldn't be done, by a movie studio without millions of dollars of expenditure just a few short years ago. So you're absolutely right. I think you have to look very skeptically at all those videos.
I love when people accuse us of doctoring footage. I'm like, really? I'm lucky I got the lens cap off the camera. I used to be really tech savvy, but then the world just passed me by.
Yeah, I think it does. I think we all have to keep training ourselves because everything's moving so fast.
But as long as we can keep figuring out how to podcast and people can keep figuring out how to download them, shows like yours and shows like ours will continue to keep on talking about the paranormal.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, looking forward, next hour we'll talk about some of these stories and we'll share some of the spooky stories.
Absolutely. And as we're getting closer to Halloween, it's the perfect time. It's a rainy night here. I don't know where you are, Jim, but here where we are, it's very rainy. It's like a nor'easter out there, so it's like the perfect night to hear these kind of stories.
Yeah, well, I'm in Ohio, but out there I know it's a dark and stormy night, and we hope that everybody will snuggle up by their fireplace and listen to the stories coming up.
As our announcer always says, turn on all the lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades, because we're going to be having some of those type of stories for you coming up in the second hour with Jim Harold. Again, if you want to purchase his book, just go to jimharold.com. You can get it on amazon.com. We probably have it in the Spooky Store by now, Matt Costa. Yep, there you go. It's right in the Spooky Store on SpookySouthCoast.com. So very many ways you can get it, and it's probably in your local bookstore too. So you got plenty of time. Run out there, grab it tomorrow, and you can have the stories for tomorrow night and for Halloween. When we come back, we're going to just really quickly touch base with Tiffany Rice about her event that's coming up on November 5th for just a couple minutes, and then we'll get right into the stories with Jim. A couple other things that I do want to mention, and Jim, you had him on your show, Christopher Coratino, former Christopher Lutz. He's got his big pay-per-view coming up on Halloween night. That's going to be $5 a person. $5 a view if you go to, it's tvoop.com, tvoop.com, and you can also go to AmityvilleHorrorChallenge.com. Are you interested in seeing what he has to say?
Yeah, I am interested in seeing what he has to say. I mean, we had an interview, we talked. He certainly has a different perspective, and as he said on my program, and I'm sure in his discussions with you, he just feels that the real story's not been told. He went as far to say that there was a very specific reason why those spirits were visited upon his house. He kind of laid the blame on the doorstep of George Lutz for playing around in the occult. So, yeah, I think it'll be fascinating to hear what he has to say.
And the only problem is we all got to pay $5 to hear it. But hey, it's no different. If he put it out in a book form, you'd pay a lot more. So.
That's true.
And then so this will be Halloween night. So we've got all kinds of things coming up for you in the second hour of this show, but we're hoping that we can scare the pants off you before. Well, I know, some of you single people out there. You can call Moniz for that, but we just want to make sure that we send you to bed and give you some nightmares. So we'll be right back with some scary stories, some interesting stories, some poignant stories from the new book, Jim Harold's Campfire: True Ghost Stories, coming up in just a few minutes after the news here on Spooky South Coast.
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420. WBSM, a Cumulus station.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. A march by 2,000 Occupy Denver protesters leads to arrests and now more police action. These demonstrators, when marching toward the steps of the state capitol, were met with police. The reports say pepper spray was used, rubber bullets fired, and now arrests are continuing as police try to clear out the Occupy encampment. Denver Police Lieutenant Matt Murray says using force wasn't something authorities wanted to do but had no choice.
We respect their constitutional rights to do what they're doing. Unfortunately, at a certain point, they went up onto the state capitol grounds in an area that they were told to evacuate. They chose not to do that. We at that point had to step in with the state police in order to push them back off that property.
Some of the 1,000 or so protesters who've marched the past few hours in San Francisco dressed up for Halloween as Wall Street bankers and others as Robin Hoods. Snowplow in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. Now 3 deaths are blamed on the pre-Halloween snowy nor'easter still going on. The heaviest snows forecast for tonight through the morning in New England. National Weather Service meteorologist David Stark says parts of New Jersey were among the hardest hit.
Some of these locations are a little bit higher up. I know this one in Passaic County where there's close to 15 inches in West Milford, they're at 1,100 feet, but still it's a pretty significant amount of snow that has fallen in many of these areas.
And more than 14 inches of snow is on the ground in Plainfield, Massachusetts. Utilities say there are 1.7 million power outages from Maryland to Maine. And passengers in a JetBlue flight diverted to Connecticut because of the snow say they were stuck on the tarmac for 8 hours. Lauren Blumenfield was on the plane.
I could hear the frustration in the pilot and in the stewardesses and the steward, but, there has to be a better way.
17 people are dead, including a dozen Americans, in the Afghan capital after a Taliban suicide bomber rammed an SUV wired with explosives into an armored NATO bus. You're listening to ABC News.
Calling people using long distance was draining my wallet. So to save money, I'm only calling people with toll-free numbers. Do any of my friends have them? No. Any family members? Nope. No one I call has a toll-free number. So, Mom, if you're listening, I got your messages. Tell Cousin Tommy I hope all is well. And honestly, would it hurt you to look into an 800 number? I'm your only son, for crying out loud.
There's an easier way to save. Get online. Go to geico.com, get a quote, or follow this guy's toll-free penchant and call 1-800-947-AUTO.
This Halloween, the savings are sweeter at Sam's Club. Dress up any get-together in every goodie bag with members-only low prices on brand-name candy, snacks and drinks, festive cookie cakes, cupcakes, and more. Not a member? Then we've got a treat for you. Join Sam's Club October 24th through the 31st and get a $10 gift card with an Advantage membership, $25 gift card with a Plus membership. That's 1 week only, so hurry in, start saving, and let the goblin begin. Sam's Club. Savings made simple.
Flown out of Libya's capital for medical treatment in the U.S., about 20 Libyans wounded in the country's civil war. U.S. Ambassador to Libya, Gene Kretz.
We've been told in many times that the care of the wounded is a critical priority for this new governing authority.
The ambassador says Secretary of State Clinton saw there was a need for American help when she visited Libya last week. 2 strikes against airlines based in Australia and France are affecting American and other air travelers. Air France flight attendants have started a 5-day strike over job terms and conditions, saying their management plans to reduce personnel on each flight, and that makes their working conditions worse, they say. Air France has already canceled at least 10 long-distance flights. Nathan Goldstick is stranded trying to get back to Los Angeles.
We can change the ticket time without, it doesn't cost us anything. But there just aren't any flights.
And Qantas flights into and out of airports like Los Angeles International are canceled as worker strikes have led the carrier to ground its entire 108 aircraft fleet. Qantas CEO Alan Joyce.
This is a very tense environment. Individual reactions to the lockout decision may be unpredictable. We're always conservative in our approach.
Scheduled Sunday to discuss a report that recommends replacing California's medical marijuana program with a system that treats and taxes pot like alcohol. Directors of the American Society for Addiction Medicine meeting in Washington. This is ABC News.
Trying to sell your old car? Instead, donate your vehicle to Heritage for the Blind. Pickup is free and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-895-8035. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats, whether they run or not. Donate your vehicle and you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to over 50 locations. Call 1-800-895-8035. That's 1-800-895-8035.
Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
The cat population at Forever Paws Animal Shelter at 300 Linwood Street in Fall River has become overwhelming. They need your help to reduce the population. Currently, they're having an overcrowded cat adoption sale on all cats that have been at the shelter for a year or longer. Their regular adoption fee of $100 has been reduced to $30 for all cats that fall into this category. Now, the price includes neuter, spay, rabies, distemper vaccines, and feline leukemia testing. This large selection of cats includes all type of personalities and colors. Bring some additional joy to your home with a new feline buddy. The cold weather's approaching, and how relaxing it is to have a warm, snuggly cat curled up in your lap. Are you willing to open up your heart and home? These cats have been waiting long enough for their forever home. Come visit them today. For more information, call the shelter at 508-677-9154 or visit their website at foreverpaws.com.
The NFL is back, and so are the Patriots. You'll hear every game and every play right here on AM 1420 WBSM.
Fires to the end zone. Leaping catch, touchdown.
Coach Belichick and Tom Brady have the team ready to take on the Jets, Ravens, Steelers, Colts, and the rest of the NFL. Patriots football is presented by Pilgrim Bank, Pharma Health, Fall River Ford, A&A Jewelers, and by South Coast Hospital Systems on AM 1420 WBSM.
King Kong, lock a zombie with no conscience. Question, what do these things all have in common? Everybody knows I'm a
spooky South Coast
monster. Conquer, stop your silly nonsense. None of you niggas.
All right, welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. I like the Jay-Z intro there. We caught one, but not the other. That's fine. All right, let's before we get back into the discussion with Jim Harold and about his book, Jim Harold's Campfire: True Ghost Stories, we do want to just spend a couple minutes talking to our friend spirit medium Tiffany Rice, who has an event coming up on November 5th. Good evening, Tiffany. How you doing? Oh, yeah, Matt's got to turn on the caller line. There you go. How are you, Tiffany?
Hi, how's everybody doing?
Oh, spooktacular as always.
Good. Enjoying the storm?
Oh, yeah. We got to drive home in it. So tell everybody about what's coming up November 5th.
Well, I'm having my Spirit Connections event. It's actually taking place at the Center in East Bridgewater, actually right off of Route 18, South Shore, Mass. It's going to be from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'm having most of my guests have been on the show Spirit Connections that I do on Tuesday nights. It's going to be a meet and greet. I know I'm having Andrew Lake there, Matt Moniz, the Phantom PI crew is going to be there. Going to have some people doing some readings, Terry Jamrose and Mandy Avery. And it's going to be a meet and greet, book signing, and presentations galore. So it's definitely something that you probably want to try to do if you can. It's $8 to get in, and kids under 5 are free, and so you could actually bring the whole family if you wanted to.
There you go. And what are the times on that again?
That's going to be from 11 to 7, November 5th, this Saturday, a week from today.
All right. So if you don't have if you haven't seen some of these people on Spirit Connections, of course you can go back and watch all the archives. And now that you've moved to the big studio there, you can now watch it not only on Spooky TV, but also on Wareham Community Television, too, as well.
Excellent. Yep, exactly. That just happened a couple weeks ago. So anybody who wants to check it out, they can go to either SpookySouthCoast.com/SpookyTV, just like you guys got in here tonight, or you could go to WCTV, and it's Channel 30 on Comcast, Channel 9 on Fios. So it's in the Wareham region, though. So, yeah. I would definitely love to hear from you guys.
I got to beg to differ on that, though. I think it's Channel 30 on Fios and Channel 9 on Comcast.
Oh, did I get it? I got it backwards. I'm sorry.
Well, just because I watch a lot of Wareham TV and I'm a Fios guy, so I know that it's Channel 30. And that's where I was watching you the other night with Mike Markowitz.
Yes. Did you like it?
Oh, of course. I always enjoy Spirit Connections, and if you haven't seen it, you should absolutely go back and watch it on the archives.
I did. I hope everybody else did.
I'm talking about everybody else. All right, so
if I missed anything.
Is there a show coming up this Tuesday?
Yeah, this Tuesday at 8 p.m. I'm going to have the Phantom PI crew on. They're actually a paranormal group based out of Wareham.
Excellent.
And they go on doing paranormal investigations. So, yeah, they just premiered a couple weeks ago, and they're going to be coming out with their second episode in a couple weeks. So I'm going to have them on and talk to Stephanie Burke and Carlston Wood.
Awesome. Well, we will all be tuned in Tuesday night at 8 o'clock on Spooky TV, on SpookySouthCoast.com, and on Wareham TV.
All right, excellent.
All right, thanks. November 5th again. November 5th, 11 to 7 at the Center in Middleborough?
Nope, it's actually in East Bridgewater. East Bridgewater, yeah.
All right, so and everybody can just go to your Spirit Medium Tiffany page on Facebook for all the updates and details, right?
Definitely.
All right, so
all right.
Hopefully, if I don't have to work, I'll see you there, but I know that tons of Spooky South Coast listeners will be there.
Excellent. Thanks, guys, for having me on.
All right, happy Halloween.
You too.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Again, that you can go to her Spirit Medium Tiffany page on SpookySouthCoast.com. On Facebook, and you can find it all linked up on SpookySouthCoast.com on the Spirit Connections page there as well. So, all right, now we're going to get right back into the discussion about Jim Harold's Campfire: True Ghost Stories with the author of that book, Jim Harold. You know him from the Paranormal Podcast and from the Jim Harold's Campfire Podcast. And Jim, I got to ask you, what's out of all these stories that you're putting together, both for the book and in the podcast, itself? What's the strangest story that you've ever heard?
Well, one that I have that I call actually in the book is the spookiest story, and I think because it talks about something I think most of us are fascinated by, is called Lucifer and the Lamp, and it's about a Ouija board. Would you like me to read you a little bit of it?
Sure, if you don't mind.
Well, here it is. This is actually, and this is what I love about, we have people from all over who listen to the program. So this is from Leanne in Utah, and she says, I was about 15, and my friend Bridget and I were looking for something to do after school one day, and she suggested a Ouija board that she had at home. So we pulled it out and set it up on the floor. In order to make it a little more spooky, I guess, she turned off all the lights and just had a lava lamp on. It was set right next to the board. She started asking questions like, is anyone there? And it seemed to be responding, the board that is. And she asked for it to give us a sign. We waited. Nothing happened for a while, so we moved on, and she kept asking other questions. And out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the lava lamp. All of the wax was collecting in one solid ball, which I thought was weird. So I kept watching it, and slowly it was forming into the shape of something. So I pointed it out to my friend, thinking that this was our sign. As we watched, it shaped into the form of the head of a devil. And it was so detailed, and there's no way that a lava lamp could have made that much detail. Its mouth was open like it was growling. It had fangs. Its eyes were very angry. It was facing us. It didn't move within the water of the lava lamp at all. It faced us the whole time, and then I said to my friend, oh my God, it's the devil. And we both took our hands off the board immediately, and it just went back to the lava lamp bubbles. She says after that, I didn't play with the board much. I tried it one other time with a friend, and I made sure every light in the house was on, and the windows were open, thinking that the dark maybe had something to do with it. Now, Leanne says she doesn't know if it was evil necessarily because it went away and it wasn't threatening. She thinks maybe it was something playing a joke on them, a spirit. She's not sure. But she does think it was something, and it did pique her curiosity about all different matters paranormal. She just thinks something had to have made that lava lamp do that. And I would tend to agree.
Oh, sure. What surprises me, though, she says she's not going to play with the board anymore, but did she keep the lava lamp? That's what I want to know. I'd throw that thing out in the trash right away. I'd be sending that thing to John Zaffis.
Exactly. That's a good point. I think John would be a perfect person to send it to. No, I just, that whole idea of just that glob